high and the mighty will fall. There will be no power brokers, the wall of power will fall.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Wall of Power Radio Hour. This is your host, Paul Metza. We are continuing our tribute to the late, great Spider John Koerner, a man who I've considered for years to be America's greatest folk singer, who passed away at the age of 85 last May. We've got three guests that know quite a bit about Spider John. Tom Nelson from Tom's Burnt Down Cafe in Madeline Island. Jack Pasternacki, my longtime guitar player with my band Cats and the Stars, and great acoustic fingerstyle and flat picker Dakota Dave Hull. I hope you enjoy these stories as much as I've enjoyed collecting them. First up, Tom Nelson from Tom's Burnt Down Cafe, considered to be the greatest dive bar in Wisconsin, where John Koerner played for years, twice a summer, for a couple of decades.
I met John for the first time. A friend of mine brought him over to Madeline Island. He'd been playing at the North Coast Community Sailing event over in Red Cliff Indian Reservation next door. And my friend Teddy Gephardt brought him over to introduce him. And he was the most mild-mannered guy he had ever met. I had no idea that I was hiring a freaking powerhouse. It turns out we loved him so much. He was invited back every year since about like 96, 98, and he played two shows, Friday and Saturday nights, and that went on for years. I mean, I could hardly contain myself when he would play the days of old, when we dug up the gold, in the days of 49.
Yeah, I remember it like it was yesterday.
I remember it. Now I can hear it. So my office was in the chicken coop next to the bar, and he crashed in a bed right above my office desk. So when it came time for him to get ready to come on, he'd tune his guitar, and I could hear his foot tapping. It tapped a lot louder than his guitar. And my God, it's one of my favorite memories. So he played two shows a week for 2 weeks a year for, I don't know, 10 years. Started getting old and wanted maybe an opening act. So he suggested one. It was called The Pines. Benson Ramsey and David Huxfeld. I think Benson was Bo Ramsey's son.
Sure.
And we've been in contact ever since. What do you want to know?
Well, you used to take John sailing as well, right?
Well, virtually a prerequisite. Yeah, he loved the water, and I think the first time I took him out, it was on a sailboat race because I didn't own a big sailboat, but I raced on one. So that was exciting for him. He liked it. My friend Teddy Gephardt, who first introduced him to me, took him sailing repeatedly as part of the youth camp community sailing organization that he came up to this area first to play at, and he'd play around the campfire with this group of, well, not exactly Boy Scouts, but an organization like the Boy Scouts. And my friend had Dave Ray and little son on the same boat. They didn't like it quite so much.
Well, I must say, John.
Snaker Dave was worried like crazy about his older guitar being on a sailboat, the humidity and all that. John always took it all in stride. It can be dated because it was when they first played together at Lake Superior, Big Top, Chautauqua up here. It was Chautauqua wanted it to be billed as the reunion of Snaker, of Koerner, Glover, and Ray, but they had made their deal, and they were never on the stage at the same time. Same thing happened at my place 5 or 6 years later. We're all there, all playing songs, but never were the three of them on the stage at the same time at my place, as hard as I tried to get them up there.
Well, they were hard guys, but all sweet as can be. Tell us one more story, Tom. When I was setting up the interview with you a day or two ago, you told me how much John liked the Lake Superior salmon.
Well, that's almost right. He had just returned from a trip to Long Beach, California, with Garrison Keillor and the Prairie Home Companion.
Sure.
They set him up at the Carlton, the Ritz-Carlton there in Long Beach.
Yeah.
And he was ordering room service, smoked salmon. And he went straight from there to play our place, which is a double threat. You know, we're not just a beach bar, we're also a dive bar. So he would crash there, but some of our female bartenders had by then figured out what John liked, and they made him this a bowl of hummus, just the way he liked it. And he always gave us credit for that. He told me that he enjoyed playing the Burn Down Cafe on Madeline Island more than going out to California and doing the big money gig because the girls would dance to his music. He didn't really like people just sitting there listening to him play. He wanted the hippie chicks and the pretty girls and everybody dancing to his music. As small as a joint as ours is, he loved that people would get up and dance all night for him.
Well, he was truly a one-man band. Tom Nelson, one more question before I let you go. How are you going to remember Spider John Koerner?
Well, always. And the days of 49, a song he never did find out who wrote. A lot of the songs he played were songs that he didn't know who wrote them, but he wanted to keep them alive. And if he wants to keep music alive, so do I.
I'm old time more of the bummer, sure in the good old golden days. They call me a bummer and a gins I do, but what do I care for praise? I wander around from town to town, just like a roving sound. The people all say that goes time more of the days of 49. My comrades, they all love me well, they's a jolly saucy crew. A few hard cases I will admit, though they was brave and true. Whatever the pinch, they never would flinch, and they never would have fret or whine. Like good old bricks, they stood the kicks in the days of 49. There's old Lame Jeff, he's a hard old cuss, and he never did repent. He never was known to miss a drink or ever spend a cent. But old Lame, just like all the rest, touched that he did design. And in his gloom, he went off to bloom in the days of 49.
You are back with the Wall of Power Radio Hour. This is your host, Paul Metza, as we continue our tribute to the late, great Spider John Koerner. I have a very good friend of mine on the line, Jack Pasternacki. Not only was he born on Bronco Nagurski's birthday, he also holds the record for longest touchdown from scrimmage for the 1973 Roosevelt High School Blue Devils. And he's been playing with me in Cats Under the Stars for many decades. He's a big fan of John Koerner's, as we all are, and he's spent some time listening to John over the years and hanging out with him at Palmer's Bar and other places. Jack, thanks so much for taking the time to chat about Spider John tonight.
Glad to do it, Paul. I've been thinking a lot about Spider John since his passing, and have time to look back over all the years of music that he gave us, and he was such a seminal figure on the West Bank down here in the cities. It was incredible.
When was the first time you stumbled on either John Koerner's music or Koerner and Glover?
I can tell you it was at our friend Jeff Johnson's house, probably in 1968. We were in junior high, and either his older brother or older sister had left the second Koerner and Glover record, More Blues, Rags, and Hollers. And as we put that thing on the turntable, most days we're listening to rock and roll in the late 60s, and this thing came on, and it kind of blew the roof off your head. It was like, what is this stuff? It was fantastic because folk music had gotten, some parts of folk music had gotten a little tame in the 60s.
Right.
With the Kingston Trio, etc., and you put these guys on the turntable, and there was nothing hokey about Koerner and Glover, and it wasn't very folky. It was more rock and roll with acoustic guitars.
Yeah, they were phenomenal. So, did you see, before you moved down to Minneapolis, Jack Pasternacki, did you ever see Koerner and Glover in Duluth or any northern venues, or when you were in college down in southern Minnesota?
I think when I went to the University of Minnesota in the fall of '74, Koerner was around then, and he was starting to come out with his solo records then, focusing on folk music. And that stuff was on the radio. And I probably saw him, that's the first time I saw him solo.
What do you remember
that
about
record?
singing for
that record. That record had, it's interesting that he had that funky feel when he took on folk music, which sounded simplistic, but he had this terrific rhythmic approach. He'd stomp his foot to give you the straight time, and then that guitar playing with a lot of thumb, finger picking, and he would then have the great vocals, but the guitar playing was actually really intricate, and if you weren't listening closely, you could miss it, because he would intentionally slow down the beat or go faster. And once later, many years later at Palmer's Bar, I asked him, I said, John, it seems to me that you're intentionally messing with the time when you play this folk music. And he said, yeah. He says, I slow it down, I speed it up. He says, the audience doesn't even know I'm doing it. It's like mind control.
Well, I know you spent some quality time at the Palmer with Koerner over the years, as a lot of us did, and there's such precious times in retrospect. But there's a couple of stories that you and I chatted about over the years. One involved Jack Nicholson. Do you remember that story?
Yeah, John told me about a time when he was out on the West Coast and did a screen test, a Hollywood screen test for a movie, and Jack Nicholson was involved, and he told me that because he'd seen Nicholson in Easy Rider drinking from a pint of Jim Beam, he thought he would be an okay guy. And then, but nothing ever came of the screen test, but it does show you, though, to give you a little indication of where Koerner was in terms of people across the country knew who he was, and the guy gets a Hollywood screen test. Now, at that same conversation, okay, this is a guy now who's a folk musician, supposedly. He starts telling me about that famous book by Konstantin Stanislavski, who wrote the actor technique book called An Actor Prepares, the Stanislavski method. And he's telling me all about this book, and I'm thinking, okay, so John Koerner has obviously read this book and gotten behind these techniques about creating a believable character. And I wondered how much of that went into this whole folk music thing.
Right.
Where, it got pretty heavy there at Palmer's for a while.
That's a great story. I'll have to pick up the book and see if I can learn anything. Well,
I just Googled it right now, and if you look at what the basic precepts of the Stanislavski technique are, one of it is a thing called the magic if, which means if you were the character, how would you react? So it just makes me think of how deep John went on that stuff.
Wow, that's incredible. So, what did we've all seen John. He was such a fixture on the West Bank. And along with, Dave Ray and Tony Glover and playing in those different duos with, whether it was Koerner and Glover, Ray and Glover, or Koerner and Ray. And then, of course, let's not forget all the great work he did with Willie Murphy.
Right. And that, I've never seen the film. I believe you've seen it, right?
Yes.
The
Sleep thing.
Yes. And The Secret of Sleep, and then I remember, Paul, you mentioning that there was some almost Chaplin-esque stuff that people always talk about Bob Dylan being a little bit of there's a Charlie Chaplin influence there, but you wonder sometimes what came first, Koerner or Dylan.
Yeah. Interesting.
In terms of impact.
Interesting point of view, Jack. Now that he's gone, he lived to be 85 years old, which is a great run. But he was kind of the guy, you thought he was always going to be there, because he always was. Since I moved to Minneapolis in 78, you moved down not long after that. It was such a reassuring presence just to see Koerner, whether it was playing in a local bar or having a drink, or back when, I was always so honored, Jack. We did 4 years of Tuesdays with Cats Under the Stars at the 400 Bar at the corner of Cedar and Riverside. And it was always such an honor to see Koerner in the audience when we played.
Absolutely. I mean, it was like, because we had the similar lineup of two guitars and a harmonica, and I can remember looking out over the crowd at the 400 and John Koerner standing there listening to us play Sonny Rollins' St. Thomas. And I thought, this all makes sense now. John Koerner's here.
Yeah, right. What, when you heard that he passed, I'm sure it struck you and hurt you as much as it did myself and hundreds of others. But tell us about when you actually heard the news that Koerner passed.
Well, he was like you said, such an institution down here on the West Bank, and then he was such a singular interpreter of music that my thought was, number one, very sad to lose a great guy like that with a great sense of humor, but then there was nobody quite like him musically. And if you go through the John Koerner, if you have a chance to just go through all of the recorded history of John Koerner, you see that there's like three major moments of John Koerner's performance life. You've got Koerner, Ray, and Glover at the start, then he takes off on a kind of a solo blues thing for a while that was really interesting, especially his guitar playing. And that's before he gets into the folk music emphasis. And all of it's a little different, so he kept evolving. But I loved the humor as so many other people did. I can remember one night watching him play down at the Dakota, kind of a nice jazz club down here in the cities. And of course, the first thing Koerner says when he gets on stage is, "How's my hair look?" Oh.
Jack Pasternacki, I knew we needed to talk to you as part of our tribute to the late, great Spider John Koerner. Just tell us, I know you got to run, but tell us how you're going to remember Spider John.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm playing the records in my basement right now, and I'm looking stuff up on the internet. I'm going back and doing a deep dive because there's a lot of great recorded stuff out there that never made it to record, but it's on the internet now. That Live at McCabe's thing that I sent you, that's fantastic listening. And then every time I pick up a guitar and stamp my foot, man, I'm thinking of John Koerner every day.
That is a beautiful way to end this conversation with Jack Pasternacki, longtime guitarist with Cats Under the Stars. Before that, Hot Walleye, America's Dress Fishing Band. We've been playing together for way too long, or not long enough. Jack, thanks so much for these remembrances, and I hope to see you up north here soon.
You got it. See you, Paul. Thank you.
Delia cursed out Tony on a Saturday night. I cursed him such a wicked curse, he swore he'd take her life. Delia's gone, one more round and Delia's gone. The first time he shot her, and he shot her in the side. The second time he shot her, well, she lay down and died. Delia's gone, one more round and Delia's gone. They called for the doctor and he came dressed in black and did everything a doctor could do, but he couldn't bring Delia back. Delia's gone, one more round and Delia's gone. Monday he was arrested and Tuesday he was tried. The jury found him guilty and the judge said 99. And Delia's gone, one more round and Delia's gone. 99 years in the prison, hey judge, that ain't no time. I got a brother in New Orleans.
I couldn't be more delighted to talk to an old friend of mine, a true stalwart of the West Bank folk scene, Dakota Dave Hull. When I met Dave, he was a master flat picker, and over the years he's turned into an exquisite finger picker, spends a lot of time performing in Japan. He's in Minneapolis working on a new live record, and he's driving up north in his car, and we're so glad we got a chance to talk to Dave about his memories and memories of the great Spider John Koerner. Dave, how are you this evening?
I'm doing just fine. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Like everybody, missing Spider John. You know, we all thought that guy was going to live forever, although he did live to be 85. But was truly an end of
a good ride, isn't it?
Great ride.
That's a good ride, isn't it?
And productive, you know, to the end. Is just stopped playing several years ago, but just a great human being that you could still see till recently at his stool at Palmer's Bar. Let's talk about Dave. You came from Fargo years ago and entered the West Bank music scene. Talk about your first remembrances of Spider John and, of course, then Koerner and Glover.
Well, of course, my first experiences with them were on record when I was a teenager growing up in Fargo. They had come out with their first couple of Elektra records, and I was just starting to get into folk music, aware of some of the, the deeper end of the folk revival. And so I heard those guys, and it was like, what is this? This is incredible stuff. I was pretty green, and I didn't know much of anything, but I did know good music when I heard it, and those guys were great. Fast forward a couple of years, I moved in late 69, I think, and sometime within the next couple of years, I don't remember when it was, there was one of those outdoor Cedar Avenue festivals going on, and somehow or another I finagled a set, and I'll remember this. After the set, Dave Ray came up to me and, just was encouraging and as nice as could be, and introduced me to John and to Tony after we had talked a little bit, and that was the first time I met John Koerner. And, of course, we got to know each other over the years as well. We all did.
We talked with Charlie McGuire in the first episode of this tribute to Spider John Koerner, and he mentioned exactly what you were talking about, how welcoming both John and Dave Ray were to up-and-coming musicians who had just gotten to Minneapolis.
Yeah. They really were. They went out of their way to be welcoming. And I know that they paid attention. We were all around, and of course, everybody paid attention to those guys. And it was just, it was pretty remarkable. It was, some sort of validation, I guess, is what you'd have to call it, at that stage of my life with those guys who, I thought, man, those are big stars,
Yeah. Well, they
in my world, they were.
Yeah. What did you find when you started to hear Spider John solo? What was your, you are one of the greatest guitar players in Minnesota, if not the Midwest. What could you tell people about John's guitar style? Because it was so generous. Nobody played guitar like John Koerner.
Well, that's true. He was absolutely unique. He had just talking about this the other day with somebody, he had a rhythmic thing that he did. Typically, near the end of every song, he would insert a little pause, and it was the way he felt it. And I've never heard anybody do quite that. It just, you listen to John, and I can tell you within a couple of bars of music that, that's John. If somebody was giving me a blindfold test, that's John. Could be anybody else. And of course, his vocal gives it away when that comes in. But yes, he was amazing.
Talk a little bit about, I got to town in 78, lived in South Minneapolis, but gravitated right to the West Bank because you had the new Riverside Cafe and the Cafe Extemp. And then not long after, they started having music at the 400 Bar on Cedar and Riverside. Were you around when, of course, then the Viking and occasionally Palmer's, but were you around to catch any of the Koerner and Glover shows at the Triangle Bar?
No. Well, the Triangle was still going when I got to town. I caught a couple of solo shows. You have to remember, by the time I showed up, Koerner was doing the duo thing with Willie and doing some solo shows as well. Running, Jumping, Standing Still came out. What year was that? 69?
Yeah, 68 to 69.
So their horizons were changing. Dave was working with a band once in a while, and so it was. You'd see them, but not together. I didn't see them play together until many years later.
Tell the people out there that never experienced what a great music scene the late 60s, 70s, and 80s, and into the 90s that the West Bank was.
Well, we had the Extempore, which was way different from the coffee shops of today. It was really a hangout. There was a performance space, an auditorium in there, sort of, you could call it that, full of couches and old chairs and, stuff like that. It was a comfortable, very comfortable room. And then there were a bunch of other rooms in the place. There was a little sort of semi-cafe, some tables down where you first walked in. So it was a social meeting place as well as a performance space. There were some rooms upstairs. I remember in maybe 1970, 1971, the guitar players would get together, some 1 or 2, 3, 4 people, and kind of just show each other the newest cool thing that we had figured out that week. It was really a give and take scene, and we don't really have a place like that anymore. It was almost like headquarters, you know what I mean?
Right. Well, and along with right next door, the new Riverside Cafe.
That was another gig, and, you could, they had the cafe, were doing vegetarian food, doing every night. So we were pretty much guaranteed that we'd have a couple of gigs every month, at the very least, between those two venues. And there was also the Hull Coffee House at the U of M, and that was good for, 1 or 2 gigs every year as well. So it was an interesting scene. It was a great scene to break into, really. I couldn't have chosen a better place. It was guitar centric, and that was kind of what I wanted to do. And people were sharing, really, really generous with their with their time and knowledge and experience.
Did you ever get a chance to play formally on a stage or informally with Spider John Koerner, guitarist to guitarist?
I think yes. The short answer is yes. When it was just a tune or two, Smithsonian Folkways was doing what worked out as a video of music by the Mississippi River. And so this was the furthest north, and so they gathered a bunch of us. I can't remember who all. I'm sure Peter Ostrushko was one of them. Maybe Butch, I'm not sure. But they filmed it, of course, at Palmer's. And,
of course.
Of course. I mean, and it was really a very, very, very cool thing. But no, didn't play together a lot. I worked on two of his albums.
Which ones, Dave?
I produced Nobody Knows the Trouble I've Been, and played on that one. And then I played on Raised by Humans.
I would guess, Dave.
Go ahead.
I would guess both those records was mostly first takes.
Actually, Nobody Knows the Trouble I've Been was almost all first takes. We did that at Creation, direct to 2-track tape, when Creation was still out in Bloomington.
Right,
and,
right.
We had 2 nights booked, which, that's the optimism of youth, right? And the first night, we got things right, the sound right, and everything. And there were some 50, 60, 80 mile an hour straight on winds that knocked out the power.
Wow, of course.
And yeah, and we waited around, and it didn't come back on, and it didn't come back on. And it was like, okay, we'll call it a night. So the next night we get there and we recorded the whole damn thing in one night.
Yeah. As well it should be.
We finished up. Well, it was, maybe 6 to 6 overnight. It was pretty exhilarating. And, just one of those amazing things. It was not a small group, and it just everything, the stars aligned. And I think it would have been a different album if it hadn't worked out that way. That's not a qualitative judgment, but rather just a thought that it probably would have sounded different.
Dakota Dave Hull, do you have any memories of any of Koerner's jokes? Because not only was he a fabulous musician, but a great entertainer who would every handful of songs you'd hear a great joke. He was a sit down comedian.
Oh yeah, he was fabulous. He had for a while when he was telling a joke, he had this umbrella hat that he put on.
I remember that.
Colored umbrella hat. It was really, really funny. And then he'd tell the joke. One I remember, and it's just quintessential Koerner, if you want me to tell it.
Oh, hell yeah. Hell yeah.
So this guy goes into a lumber yard, says, do you have 4x2s? the guy says, well, do you mean 2x4s? The guy said, well, just a second. I got to go out to the truck and ask my brother. A couple minutes later, he comes back in. He says, yeah, that's right. 2x4s. That's what we need. And guys, yeah, we got those. How many of them do you want? Well, just a sec. I got to go out to the truck and ask my brother. And a couple minutes later, he comes back in. He says, I guess we need 100 of them. Guy says, okay, yeah, I got that. How long do you want them? He says, well, just a minute. I got to go out to the truck and ask my brother. A couple minutes later, he comes back in and says, my brother says we need them for a long time because we're building a house out of them.
Touche, Dave Hull. Dave, I'm so enjoying talking to you.
What?
That is Koerner to the T. Tell us
I thought so.
one more time, and we'll let you keep driving. We so appreciate your time. What do you think? How are you going to remember Spider John Koerner, and how do you think he figures in to the history of American folk music?
Well, John, like so many of us, was a product of the folk revival, right?
Yep.
And I mean, there were many, and are many great revivalists out there. John and Dave and Tony were at the forefront. First of all, they were the first, among the first young people to embrace country blues and really dig deep into that and get into it. Dave Van Ronk was another one. There were a few people around in those days that were into that, but very few. And if they weren't first, they were second. And then John got into American folk music and just learning those old songs, and his own spin on them was remarkable. The the records that I was a part of, and many others that he was doing that stuff. Nobody does that music like that, and it sort of tells us that the music is still viable, is still really a living thing, right? It's
alive and breathing. Totally.
And the folk process is still going on. That these things do move around and change over time, and John personifies that, in my opinion.
I call me a dog when I'm gone, black dog when I'm gone. When I do get back with $100 bill, Daddy, where you been so long? My papa, he learned me to gamble. He told me bet on the old deuce and trade. When I do see my last old deal go down, I'd bet on some old deuce and trade. Well, you call me a dog when I'm gone. It's black dog when I'm gone. When I do get back with $100 bill, Daddy, where you been so long? I rolled my dice in Cuba. I dealt my cards in Spain. When I do see my last old dollar go, I'ma get on some old freight train. call me a dog.
We'd like to thank the following businesses for supporting our Spider John Koerner tributes. First of all, Grumpy's Bar Northeast and Palmer's Bar on the West Bank. Palmer's will be hosting a potluck at the Spider John Koerner Memorial at the Caboose Sunday, June 23rd. The memorial goes from 1 to 4. At 5 o'clock, there will be a potluck at Palmer's Bar. We'd also like to thank Willie's American Guitars. They've got a new shop over by Como Park in St. Paul. They've got the finest selection of new and used guitars in the Midwest. And also John Clifford and the folks at Hi-Fi Hair and Sound, the cool rock and roll hair and record joint right off Loring Park. Thanks for listening to the Wall of Power Radio Hour. We'd like to thank everyone that's been chiming in on these Spider John Koerner tribute episodes. You can follow me at paulmetza.com. And like my dad used to say, remember to be kind and make someone happy.